Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Concilium Urbis from Paralocal Games. Concilium Urbis is a tile-laying, I cut, you choose, let's vote on the laws kind of game. Yes, that's three strong core mechanics all being utilized together over here. The basic idea, the core of it, is going to be it's a tile-laying game. You are gathering tiles from this bag over here across 7 rounds of play. You're going to be gathering 4 tiles each round with some caveats we'll get there, and then placing them down into your own personal tableau to try to score as many points as possible based on the 6 scoring cards you have in play that dictate how you score. Just to give you one example, or let's give you 2 examples, you have some sense of how this game scores. Over here, this card is going to tell you that you want a perfect 5x5 grid in your city, and if you have anything outside of that, if you have either more or fewer tiles, you'll lose 2 points per tile that you're off from that perfect 5x5 grid. So now you have an objective in mind. And then secondly, let's say you have this card over here. This card is going to want you to have all your factories, your orange factories together. I actually think these are the factories, these are the mines. You're going to want to have your mines all grouped together. If you have up to 5 mines grouped together, that's going to be 12 points, but you want to get larger groups of mines. So ideally, if you have like 2 groups of 5, that's 10 mines, going to be 24 points in the game. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to bulk up your mines in groups together. The other ones will all give you different things, different tiles that want to be next to each other, different ways that you want pollution to be managed in your city. There's all these different tiles going on, but just to give you a core example, that's 2 cards giving you different things you're trying to be mindful of. So now you understand the idea that this is a tile-laying game. You want tiles, you place them into your grid, you try to do so to fulfill certain criteria in the game. Now there's also going to be these scoring cards over here, which will give you an opportunity to pay into earning scoring criteria for 3 of the 6 kinds of tiles. You get 2 points each for 3 of the 6 kinds of tiles. You're going to mix those up, we'll only have 3 of those in play, and that will also alter what you're choosing throughout the course of the game. Which brings us to the choosing part of the game. Because in the choosing part of the game, you're going to gather 4 tiles from the bag, and again, you are going to have across 7 rounds of play, you're going to have variable number of tiles in the bag based on the player count. You look at your 4 tiles, and then you go ahead and create a pairing. This is actually 2 of the same kind. This one's marginally better. Maybe I'll go ahead and just split these up like this, which isn't great. I know what they're going to pick, but I'll go ahead and do this. I'm going to pass this to the player over here, and they're going to select one of these groups and then pass me back the other. They'll actually pass me back that one almost certainly, because a 3 is straight up better than a 2 over here. So you go ahead, you create these pairings. This is the I cut, you choose aspect of the game, where every single time you're gathering tiles, you are both going to be creating a pairing and passing it to a player who's going to pass you back one of your 2 pairings, but meanwhile, the other player to your other side is doing the exact same thing. So every single round, on average, you're going to end up with 4 tiles, 2 that you got passed back to you, and 2 that you chose from somebody else's pairing. I say on average because especially as the game develops, you're going to find players will start mixing and matching into 1 and 3 piles instead to try to ensure that they get the tile they want, or possibly intimidate you with larger number of tiles, especially when you're considering a tile like this, where you're going to score negative points for anything outside your distribution. Sometimes having more tiles isn't always better. But I'd say in general, you're looking on getting roughly 4 times 7 tiles, or 28 plus your starting tile for 29 total tiles in the game. That's going to be your rough number of tiles. Again, it will branch out as players, well, play. That's going to be the second aspect of the game. So we have tile laying, we have point scoring optimization, we also have the I cut, you choose, but then it brings us to the voting aspect of the game. You see, every single round you're going to be gathering 2 cards from this deck over here, and you're going to be voting on these cards one after the other. You're going to go ahead, and players are going to be gathering votes in the game. You're going to have towers in the game that are going to give you votes every single round. You're going to have more towers you can get, so you automatically start with an income of 2 votes per round, but you're going to be gathering more from the various towers you put into play, so you might be getting 7 votes a round. You might be completely controlling the Senate of the game. But what's going to happen is, in order on those 2 cards, you're going to vote to either pass or fail that particular card. So you look at the first card over here, you say, hey, this card over here, this card is going to make the negative scoring for this worse, effectively meaning that every player who branches away from a perfect 5x5 grid, they're going to be losing 3 points for each way they branch apart, as opposed to branching in, which effectively means during the course of the game, shuffled into this pile, there are 3 kinds of cards. There's going to be, for each of the scoring cards, there's going to be 1 card that makes the scoring better. So if you're doing well at that thing, you're going to get more points, or in the case of distribution in particular, if you're doing well at the thing, it's fewer negative points, it's more negative points for the other players, I guess is how you look at it. But effectively, there's 1 card that makes it stronger, and 1 card that makes it weaker. And that means you as the players have the opportunity to decide what you think is going to benefit you versus the other players. If I know that I'm going for a perfect 5x5 grid, I want all the players to be penalized for every step that they weren't going to go for that 5x5 grid. Because if I'm only 1 off, I'll get negative 3 points. But if you were 5 off, you'll get negative 15 points. That's huge. But this is where you want to pay attention to the other players at the table. Because if you're the only one who cares about that thing, you will almost certainly be outvoted unless you control all the power of the Senate and have all the votes coming your way. And so you are looking at the various scoring scoring cards that are coming out every single round, those that are making scoring worse and better, and trying to choose when and how to implement them. Because again, the reverse is true as well. If I have this card in play, and if I know that I haven't been going ahead and gathering these tiles, over here you're going to want the factories and the mines next to those towers over there, but effectively next to the housing tiles. So if I know that I don't have my factories and mines next to the housing tiles, well then I don't want to pass that, because the players who do have it are getting extra points. So now I'm trying to vote against that resolution passing. Now in this deck, you're going to have one card that makes it stronger and one card that makes it weaker, which also introduces the danger that the first time you vote on a card, that card may even be replaced later with another card, except two cards are always not in place. You never know for sure whether it's safe to pass on the card. And then lastly, you have simply straight up bonus points. You have the opportunity for a player to vote on bonus points and just get bonus points for the game. There's going to be two of those cards mixed in as well, although which cards are gone and which cards aren't is a different conversation entirely. You're going to do that for 7 rounds of play. There's a few other aspects to get into. The most notable probably is the mines and the factories. Mines are going to generate tokens when you place them over here, but then these tokens get harvested by the factories into crystals and energy, which is used to buy these tiles over here, buy these spots where you can get extra points for various things. And so that extra element is going to be another thing you're trying to be mindful of, but that's the basic idea of Concilium or Urbis. Across 7 rounds of play, you are building out your tableau. You are doing so to most efficiently score the various scoring cards in play. You are going to be dealing with an I cut, you choose mechanic, in which you go ahead and create a pairing, pass it to a player, and they choose which of the pairings they want. And then occasionally, in every single round, you're going to be going ahead and voting on the various laws that will affect that scoring to try to see which thing will pass, which thing will do best for you, and how you can influence and sway the Senate. Every time I say the Senate, I'm just referring to the general idea that this voting. There's no actual concept of a Senate in this game. That's Concilium Urbis. Oh, I think the last thing I may or may not have mentioned is there are variable scoring cards over here. That's actually a big deal. I should mention this earlier. But for these scoring cards over here, there are 3 of each kind. So effectively, you're not just dealing with this one way of scoring the game, you're dealing with a lot of combinations, because effectively it's, I don't even know the math on that, I'd have to figure out the math, but you basically have a lot of ways you can try to go ahead and mix and match the cards to give you different scoring opportunities, giving you more variability to the game state. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into our review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play, I don't find, how to put this over here. The actual game itself is not that complicated. The actual sequence of play is very easy to teach. I did find the rulebook not the clearest as far as the general presentation, so I thought the rulebook could be smoother. But then I'd say another factor that I didn't love is, in general, the actual scoring cards themselves I find unnecessarily convoluted in the way they're phrased and how the scoring operates in the game. Some are pretty straightforward, like I specifically chose a very straightforward card show over here, similarly with this one. But the rest of the cards in general, I find even when you know them, you're constantly trying to reference how they operate. I don't know if it's iconography, I don't know if it's the language. Something about the cards makes things a little confusing, particularly dealing with factories and pollution. I found very hard to actually process how it works. Once you do understand how it works, it's easier to teach others, but I do think that, I don't know if it's play rates, I don't know if it's language, I don't know if it's the nature of how they score, but I don't find a lot of the scoring stuff immediately intuitive, but once you do start playing, it will get a little easier to go through. As far as what I like, don't like, and conceal as not liking, starting off with what I like, which to begin with is the variable scoring cards. The thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier in the video, the nature of the fact that you do have variety to the game state. You can go ahead and play through these cards over here, and then each of these cards are going to be different. Well, each of these cards are different, but each of the variations of the cards are going to give you a different way to score, so you do have different ways to play through the game. The combination of the cards that come out, the combination of the laws that come out, even the combination of these scoring cards, because only 3 out of 6 will be in every single game, will just force you to approach the game with different strategies. That thing that worked really well for you one game is not going to work for you this game. A lot depends on what's being pulled from the bag and what's on the table, how laws are being voted on, what other players are going for, and so all that gives you a nice combination of things to focus on, to think about, to try to process as you play through the game. The simultaneous play is great. This game is a 1 to 6 player game, and you could play it at the full 6 player complement and have the game go fairly smoothly, because most of the game is simultaneous, which means in general you're always as slow as your slowest player, but usually that's going to be a quick enough game state. So I like the simultaneous play, and I like the way it can accommodate a large variety of player counts fairly well. There's also lots to juggle and balance as you'd expect. This kind of is what I touched upon already, but the variety of the game is going to force you to constantly reconsider what is good for you at any given point in time, based on both the cards in play as well as based on what other players are taking. If you keep passing factories to the player on your right and they keep taking those factories and you see them going for the factories, you might have to pivot how you group tiles up together, or even just what your strategy is, so you're not in a losing battle against other players who are vying for limited resources. Try to find your path pathway forward, pivot and adjust, and the game does force you to do all of that. And then the I cut you choose mechanic does a good job of adding an additional degree of tension to the game because of the fact that you have a little bit more agency over trying to figure out what goes where, what to tempt your opponents with, and how to ideally get the best grouping of tiles that works for you while dealing with a situation where you have some agency but have to pass that agency off onto another player and hope that you did a good job creating those decisions for them. And by good job, I mean a horrible job for them where they can't choose well and they have to cast something back that they don't want to pass back. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, I'll say that elements of the game do feel more complicated than I'd like. There's lots of rereading going on. Again, I find that there are many games out there that have, like, here's a bunch of ways to score, and for whatever reason, I found this to be one of the least intuitive ways, and I don't know, least intuitive ones, and I don't know why that is. I can't really strongly pinpoint. Some things are pretty straightforward. You have your housing tile over here, and factories and mines next to it score 2 points each. I don't know why I find this so complicated, because it's not, but something about the phrasing, something about the iconography, I do find it to be really more confusing than it needs to be, and that's with the simple card. There are actually more complicated cards as well. And then another aspect is I think that despite the fact that I like the variety in the game, some of the cards are often grouped into categories of how they operate, and I didn't always feel that the variety was as much as I would like from a card that's different. It's like, it's okay, it's nice that we have a new way to score, but if it feels mostly similar to the old way, it's not adding that much variety. So there is variety. I do wish things felt more strongly different. More importantly, I'll say that the combination of laws plus tile placement plus I cut you choose is a little too much of jack of all trades, master of none. I think maybe 2 of those would have been better, and honestly I think the laws are my least favorite part. The idea of the fact that I'm working towards certain scoring combinations while dealing with the fact that those scoring combinations are going to be nerfed by other players as they vote against them is just not a fully satisfying puzzle. And you do have to include it because the nature of the towers in the game means if you took out the voting, because I'd love the idea of simply taking out the voting of the game, but the problem is you have these votes coming in from tower tiles, so it changes the entire math of everything you're going for if you remove that element. I think there's just too many elements going on at play here. You have point scoring optimization, which is great. I love that as a mechanic. But then you add that I cut you choose. Okay, I can work with this, not bad. We still have to deal with like making sure I get the right tiles back, and I have to create those piles and bundles, and I'm still getting things, so I'm still here for this kind of game. But then you add on top of that the votes and the laws and the fact that your scoring is either nerfed or powered down depending on how, nerfed or buffed, other way around, nerfed or buffed depending on what goes on. It just adds a little too much craziness and hecticness, is that a word? Hectic? Too much craziness, too much zaniness to the game state that there's a little more going on than I would like to make this as smooth of an experience as I would like. As far as I can see others not liking, sorting tiles around player count is definitely going to be a pain. Meaning in this bag over here, you want to sort out the tiles based on a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 player game. And that means you do have to go in here and grab all the tiles that have a little 4 on their back and remove them when you're playing a 3-player game. That is annoying. When I play games like this, if I have to modulate this entire bag based on the player count, usually I just won't play that game. Now, I can't speak as much for this one yet, but I will say in many games I have chosen to simply ignore that and just go ahead with a slightly uneven distribution of what will get drawn, and it can work out just fine. But the problem is, especially if you're going for certain strategies, not having any of the mines come up when you're relying on it, when otherwise if you do take out the right tiles, you will guarantee that they come up at some point. That can be a factor there in terms of minimizing the enjoyment or even balance of the game, and I just think that I would hate to go through this bag every single time to play the game and then remove the player count and then adjust back in the next time. We have a 4-player game, great, add them back in. We have a 3-player game, let's go through every single tile and pull them out. 4-player game, add them back in. I just find it's a little tedious. I don't want to dump this out and sort through it every single time I play. As far as final thoughts on Concilium Urbis, this is a tricky one for me because there's a lot here that I do like, but there are elements that hold it back for me. I do think that the tile laying is satisfying, the scoring is satisfying, the I cut you choose is satisfying, and the voting on what laws are going to be in place to modify the scoring is satisfying. It's the combination of them all that becomes a little much. It's the combination of them all that takes a little bit away from the smooth tile laying, point scoring optimization game that is a genre I know and love, and starts to move it into a, I built the best board, I did all the right things, and still because of this voting aspect, things are going to change or pivot around the game. So I think ultimately it is a good game. I appreciate the degree of experimentation that they are doing within the genre. I think it is worth checking out and trying if you want, but to me it does fall a drop short because of the way it all plays out. For me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, highly recommend you check out Lancaster. If you do like the voting going on in Concilium Urbis, a game that does it in an incredibly good way, an incredibly tight way, is going to be Lancaster, an oldie but a goodie, but possibly one of the best best voting games, possibly not voting games, possibly one of the best games in which voting was implemented as a side aspect, but that really smoothly works within the game system. And then similarly, if you want a game that's going to give you point scoring optimization with variable cards that you can mix and match to give you the puzzle that you want, I highly recommend checking out Cascadia, that will give you all that point scoring goodness, but in possibly a slightly more streamlined engine. And that's basically it. Until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you appreciate this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.